I'm gonna go ahead and call this meeting of the Project Connect Community Advisory Committee to order. It's 5 p.m. on February 12, 2025. We're at the Austin Transit Partnership Office Boardroom at 203 Colorado Street, Austin, Texas, 78701. Before I start, I just want to mention one thing to our in-person committee members. We have a tech issue today, so we don't have our microphones. We're using the owl, which means please speak up when you're asking so we can make sure that it's captured. And for the folks online, Mike and our interpreters, if at any point you cannot hear us, please just unmute yourself and let us know so we can fix that. We'll try to make sure that we are, audible.
Yeah, speak slow.
Yep, and also to speak slow, which I need to remind my own self as well. We'll start with the roll call here. So this is Chair Azhar, I'm here. Vice Chair Summers.
I'm here.
Constable Suits.
Here.
Secretary Garza. Ms. Berry.
Here.
Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Alexander Handel.
Here.
Mr. Crossley.
Here.
Ms. McGehee. Mr. Brooks. And Mr. Gorse.
Here.
Thank you all so much. As always, our first item is going to be our land acknowledgement, and I'm hoping Ms. Berry, you can guide us through it.
Should I get closer or is
Maybe you just step.
To ground yourself before starting this meeting, it's important to talk about the history of this region. Long before it came to be known as Waterloo or Austin, this region has drawn people here for thousands of years, in part because of our waterways and the wealth of natural resources. This region has been home to the Tancawa, the Cuauhteca, as well as the Comanche, Lipanapache, Sana, Humanos, and many others I may not have named, who were also caretakers of this land. I highlight this history because Native and Indigenous peoples are routinely erased from the conversation, referred to as having disappeared or having been conquered. Native and Indigenous peoples are still here and present in what we now call Austin. The pursuit of white land ownership, profit, and so-called progress has harmed Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the city. The effects of the legacy of settler colonialism, the theft of land, slavery, and genocide are still felt and present with us today. It's vital to keep this history in mind as you do this important work and to make a commitment to stop perpetuating the cycle of violence against Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
Thank you so much, Ms. Berry. This takes us to public comment. I believe we have Mr. Dyer signed up to speak. Do we have any other speakers as well? Sir, please go ahead.
Is this acceptable? This is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Just speaking a little loud.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you all for having me this afternoon. I do appreciate the time. My name is James Dyer, and I want to talk about one thing really quickly, if I could. Last fall, I applied to be a member of this commission. I was not accepted, and to be very clear, I am not here to challenge or to litigate that decision. But I do want to talk about my experience as an applicant because I thought it was very frustrating, and to be honest, unacceptable. I'll start by saying that sometime last fall, the Austin American Statesman ran a couple of solicitations for this commission and encouraged applicants to go online. I went online and submitted an application, but then nothing happened. I didn't get a receipt. I didn't get an email. Unlike, when you order a pizza or buy anything online, you get some sort of confirmation, and I got none of those. So I really just wanted to know, did my application get accepted? It was at this point that I learned that this project, which is a multi-billion-dollar, multi-year taxpayer-financed project, does not have telephone. Not knowing what to do, I called Capital Metro. I spoke to a gentleman, I don't remember his name. I said, "Did y'all get my application?" He said, "I don't know. I'll look into it. Call me tomorrow if you don't hear from him." All fair. I did not hear from him. I called him the next day to inquire about the status of the application. I was told he was at lunch. Still not heard from him. This was in September. Not knowing what else to do, I called ATP. I talked to Sophie. Sophie indicated that I asked her the same questions. She gave me the same answer. She didn't know. She'd look into it. She'd get back to me. And she did. On October the 3rd, she sent me an email that said, "Your application is received," which I very much appreciate. That was all that I wanted to know. To get that answer took multiple days and multiple phone calls across 2 different public agencies. Fast forward 3 weeks, I received an email from y'all. The email said, we have a question about your application. It was kind of an odd question, if I can be honest, but a question nonetheless. And in black print, it said that I had 24 hours to respond. Now, keep in mind, this is the first time I heard from y'all, not the second, not the fifth, not the seventh. So any sort of delay is not my fault, as far as I can tell. But in black letters, it said you have 24 hours to respond, and to put a finer point on it, this was an email from someone that I've never met, never talked to, never heard of, and wasn't expecting an email from. What would have happened if I hadn't responded in 24 hours? I did, but what if I hadn't? The email was unclear, but I hardly think that a non-response to that email would have been considered foreseen as an acceptable thing with respect to my application. I did respond to it. The answer was no. Did she receive that email? Did that sufficiently answer her question? Was there anything else in follow-up? Again, I don't know, because I never got a response. And in fact, and sadly, that was the last communication I had with respect to this project, because unless I'm mistaken, and I don't think that I am, I still haven't received any sort of communication whatsoever that says that my application wasn't accepted, or that I wasn't nominated to this commission, which again, I'm not the decider, someone else is, and I respect that decision. But to not receive any kind of notification about it, I thought was very poor. I found out about y'all sometime in December when I Googled y'all and found out that y'all are the people who had been named. I bring all this up really just for a couple of reasons, and then I'll wrap up, and I'm happy to answer any questions. First, and in the interest of complete disclosure, I have reservations about this project. I don't think I'm alone in that in this community, but sadly, I think after having had some level of experience with it, I am leaving feeling worse than better. And I think that's really a loss. I don't think that was anyone's goal, but that's how I'm leaving this process, is I'm feeling worse about the future of this project, not better. Second, and maybe more directly, if one of the performance measures of this project is going to be, does the populace feel a level of confidence in it? And if the populace's experience is remotely consistent with mine, which I would put somewhere at the intersection of indifference and neglect, and I think this project is going to have a very long and difficult road ahead of it. And if I were the member of, say, a community advisory group that theoretically is supposed to represent the interests of the community and citizenry, I might have put addressing that ethos as close to the top, and the number one thing on my priority list. That's really all that I had to say. Again, I want to thank Ms. Petkus. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She's the only person who's responded to me in this process. But otherwise, like I said, it's been a really, really frustrating one. And again, those are my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer.
Absolutely. I'll just close by saying I would have actually didn't how much time I had. Congratulations on y'all's appointment. I do mean that seriously. A lot of people have a lot of vested interest in y'all's success. So we're certainly pulling for y'all. Good luck and Godspeed.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. And one thing I'll just say is I hope you still stay engaged with us, but you also bring up good points, and we'll definitely work with staff to see how we can improve our process.
And y'all have my contact information. If I can be helpful, please let me know.
Thank you so much.
Y'all, good night.
Can I just say thank you too for
Of
that
course,
feedback?
yes.
I think that's really great feedback, and that's another way we could get better, so I really appreciate you taking the time and coming to let us know these things. I can understand how frustrating that was and can be. So I just wanna say, I really appreciate, and I know, I can imagine where it can be hard to do this too, so I just wanna say thank you, and that means a lot, and I think that is something that I just wanna make note that we should see what we can do to be better in the future, absolutely, so. Yeah.
Of course, thank you. I mean, I just kind of say, you know, metaphorically, like, I mean, y'all came to me, right? I mean, y'all said, you know, we'll take applications. I'm not, this wasn't one of those situations where I was calling to complain every day, fire a open records request every day, or throw grenades over the wall. It was a responsible solicitation. I do appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer.
Thank y'all.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? This includes folks who are joining us virtually. If you're in our attendees, if you raise your hand, we can make sure that you have speaking privileges. Not seeing any, we can move to our first item. This would be the approval of our meeting minutes from our January 8th, 2026 minutes. Those were circulated previously. Anybody have any questions or any suggested edits for those? Do we have a motion to adopt them?
I motion.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. So we have a motion from Ms. Berry, second by Mr. Crockley. This would be the approval for our January 8, 2026 meeting minutes. All those in favor say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Was MC, can you raise your hand?
Thank you, that passes unanimous. I do want to mention that we have an action item, but just to be respectful of our staff, does any committee member have any concern if we move our action item to the last end of the agenda? So that way, if our staff can be done earlier with their presentations and wishes to go leave for some reason they can. Any concerns? Not seeing any, I'm gonna move on to our discussion items and then we'll come back to our funding recommendations item. So our first item is the ATP update on the FEIS.
Yeah, is you operating? Okay.
Yes, sir. I don't know why it's-
Good evening, committee chair, members of the committee. Great to see everybody again. For those that have not met me, my name is Darren Lozano with Austin Transit Partnership, Senior Vice President of Environment and Project Development. I'll be providing the update here tonight, and myself or others of our team can answer any questions.
To be honest. I do this a long time. What's next? This out to me.
So as this is getting set up, I know it's been a couple of months since folks have heard from me, but I also understand now that we have some new members of our committee that will definitely have some updates, maybe some refreshers. And some of the information might look familiar to what you've seen before. But we're here at a time where we're presenting some pretty exciting updates that hopefully you've seen publicized or heard throughout the ATP, either via our board or our members or your direct involvement. And then there are two major milestones, as we allude to here, as we work through what's called the Federal Transit Administration Capital Investment Grant Program. A reminder, this is a long-standing program that several projects like this are funded throughout the country. So we're working with the Federal Transit Administration to receive federal funding and support. As part of this process, we need to put our project through an application cycle. And that's something that the Federal Transit Administration looks at all projects and rates.
Slow down.
Our projects are rated. And so when we submitted that application, the Federal Transit Administration looks at all these projects throughout the country. And as you can see by that second sub-bullet there is that Austin Transit Partnership, working with our community, with our partners, we actually receive what's known as a medium-high rating. And it's significant because it's the highest rating that was awarded this fiscal year through the federal government. The other major milestone that we accomplished was that we completed our NEPA, a reminder, National Environmental Policy Act, our environmental impact statement, basically closing out our environmental review. If you remember back, we started that about 2 years ago, working with the community. And in just January of 2026, about a month ago, we received what's known as a record of decision. And I'll go into more detail during the presentation. But as bolded there, and something that we're all collectively proud of, is the first major transit project, new starts project to achieve FEIS within a 2-year timeline. We work very closely with the community, with the federal government to achieve that milestone, so we're very proud of that fact as we go forward. And 2026 is going to be a very big year for us as we go beyond the National Environmental Policy Act and after our environmental analysis. Now, as we go through the presentation, I'm going to work a little backwards here, because I understand part of this is to also inform this committee what's changed between the draft EIS from a year ago to the actual record of decision. And so, Giannis, if you'll advance aside, please. This is a timeline showing when we started our environmental analysis. Again, it started with the notice of intent back in January of 2024. And then we went through two major public engagement timeframes. One was between January and March of 2024 to basically inform the public and the community of what we were going to analyze. And then when we got to the draft environmental impact statement, that was released about a year ago. And we had a 3-month public review period. And that was important because we went above and beyond the requirement of when the public is to see that document. That wrapped up in spring of this past year. We spent most of 2025 responding to comments and developing our final environmental impact statement. And that, as you can see, again, was published on January 16th of 2026. You go to the next slide, and if you are interested in reading, our final environmental impact statement and record of decision are on our website. If you go to our homepage, you'll see that every document in that is available for you to read. And what's important there is that we had every public comment that's documented in that deliverable. Over 2,500 comments is received, so if you or someone you know provided a comment, there's a individual response to every one of those comments in that document. We also incorporated some design updates from the draft environmental document that I'll talk about here in a little bit. And we also talk about all the environmental effects and our commitments to address some of the project impacts. And you'll find that in what's called a mitigation monitoring program. That's a brand new deliverable that's available, and that lists all those potential impacts and also the commitments to make sure that we minimize those impacts both during construction and operation. And you might ask, well, what does a record of decision mean? That allows us to go further into the project, advancing beyond the environmental analysis into our next phase of work, which includes design, really. That's the next big milestone that we're going to work through in 2026. Next slide, please. You know, not everybody is familiar with the NEPA or the draft environmental impact statement. And we kind of went outside of the box and used this graphic at many of our public meetings to inform the public, what does an environmental impact statement look at? And really, it's all encompassing. So if there's anything that you care about or know about or are concerned about related to the environment, it is in that document. From natural resources, from water and threatened and endangered species, to more technical items like utilities and stormwater. And then also related to communities, what are the land use impacts? What are the historical impacts? So that's what this graphic is really intended to show, that we really think about all types of potential impacts related to the project. We like to show this slide because our community engagement team was just extremely busy throughout the draft environmental impact statement process. We had 4 public meetings. Again, the federal government requires just 1, but we wanted to make sure that we went to all different locations throughout the project area. So we hosted 4 of those. We presented to many boards and commissions providing updates. We had individual community events, so we were going to where people were instead of asking people to come to us. And that is also shown there by the 40 at-stop outreach events that we held as well. And then just some of the numbers that relate to the 2,800 people we spoke with. It's broken up by 1,400 people we engage with at specific planning stops. Again, going to the riders themselves. We hosted open houses, boards and commissions, and in the community presentation, you can kind of see that we hit hundreds of people at each of those different opportunities. Next slide, please. So the community impact was really key to our final document. We took all those comments and saw what was reasonable to include in our final design. And what we saw is we saw a lot of recurring themes, and some of these were really no surprises. First and foremost, even though the document focused on the phase 1 project, we had a lot of comments supporting an airport extension. We also had projects that really directly provided input on the designs that we went forward with. And specifically, one instance was a parking ride. At each of the ends of line, we're gonna have park and ride facilities. And at 38th Street, that's where we're anticipating the highest demand in terms of people accessing the system at 38th and Guad. And so at the time of the draft environmental impact statement, we had proposed a parking structure to accommodate that. And once the community reviewed that, looked at it, felt like really a parking structure doesn't incorporate into the land use. And so we took a look at that, and as part of our final document, we are going forward with a at-grade facility that includes parking, end-of-line facilities, things that are needed for the light rail operation, bus and bike connections, so it's all going to be part of 38th Street now. So that was a change directly influenced by the community. South Congress Street, as we all know, is a very important piece of this project as well. And so we're working through many different aspects of that, working with the community, working with business owners, as we go and look forward to a solution that we're gonna work with our final designer on that location. And finally, one of the recurring themes was making sure that when we design and implement the light rail project, that we also account for bike and pedestrian connections all throughout the 10-mile project corridor. This map, really what it's intended to show you is that on the left side shows you the map that was included in the draft environmental impact statement. And then what was moved over to the final environmental impact statement, or what was the selected alternative. I know this shows as a graphic, it's like, pick the three things that are different, so I'm not gonna put you on the spot there. In other words, I'm gonna read through what has changed. You can kind of line that up with the drawings. But one of the things that we heard is from the draft environmental document, we were really missing a station between the Congress and the station to the north, the 29th Street station. And so we had an option to add in a station near Boulder Square, and so that was recommended as a new solution for the project. We also incorporated an extension to the Lady Bird Lake Bridge that you can see there in the dashed line. As it crosses south along the waterfront there, extending east along East Riverside, close to the SoCo station. We also had a Travis Heights station in the draft document that we actually removed when it came to the final document. Again, getting input from the community on that location and the station, proposed station. As part of East Riverside, we also incorporated what we called a center running bike, pedestrian, shade, and tree facilities along that side. There was a lot of opportunity in that area to incorporate bike connections and also shade connections, so that's really part of that design. And then finally, if you take a look at the left-hand graphic, when we looked at the Riverside area, the Montopolis area, we noted that there were two stations that seemed relatively close between Faro and Montopolis. And we had proposed actually just including one at Grove to remove those two and just have one at Grove. But the Montopolis community spoke up and said, actually, we want that station at Montopolis. So as you can see from the selected alternative, we now have a station at Grove and kept the one at Montopolis to really, again, adhere to what we heard from the community to make this as accessible as possible. Next slide. So to wrap up, as we look to 2026, we're going to have a lot of working activities. One of the first things we're going to do is get our progressive design builder on board, and that's slated for board approval next week. And so they're going to really help inform as we go forward over the next year and beyond by identifying a schedule that'll help inform how we sequence the project going forward. Also, very important to us is working with business owners, and so we're developing a business assistance program, talking to business owners currently, always part of our project to make sure we're in communication at all times as we advance design and construction. A big part of this project is also a public art, and so it alludes to here incorporating a public art program. If you've been to other rail systems, you see that their stations certainly have public art associated with them. The OMF is operations facility is also an opportunity as well. And then finally, we also recognize there's so much that's going to go on in downtown over the next several years. You all know it with I-35, with the convention center, with the airport. And so if you have not heard about it, there is the Central Texas Construction Partnership Program, or CTCPP, that Austin Transit Partnership is a part of. So it makes sure that all these different agencies are engaged and working with each other. And in fact, there has been a website that's just released over the last month or so, that actually tracks kind of the progress of these projects as they go forward, and any types of potential modifications to access in the downtown area resulting from these projects. So a lot of work to do over the next year. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Committee members with questions. Ms. Berry, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. It was very, great presentation, so I appreciate it. So I need to get closer. Am I good?
Well, folks online, can you hear Ms. Berry clearly?
Yeah, I can hear.
Thank you, Mr. Gorst. Ms. Berry, go ahead.
For the rating of medium high. And there was the highest rating, is this one of those like? No one gets a 5, medium, like, or what was their feedback on like why it's medium high and not high?
That's a very good question. And so one of the things I didn't talk about is when you submit this application, it looks at all types of things, including what is the future population, what does the future land use look like? What's the potential ridership and cost and all those factors. And to your point, the different grades you can get, let's say, are a low, medium, medium high, or high. There aren't that many projects throughout the country that get a high. And if anything, it's those with a very high urban core, like New York and San Fran, I think are the two that if they haven't gotten a high, they got a medium high. So a medium high isn't necessarily, you didn't get a high, you can't go forward. The threshold really is a medium. Anything that gets a medium can advance through the program. So we really kind of got that extra star by getting a medium high. That's part of the rating.
Great, and two follow,
Ms. Berry, can I ask you to
Yeah.
come up? Our interpreters cannot hear us
Okay.
very clearly.
my two follow up, like with the businesses, the support for the businesses. Is that something that you guys are working with, like the city of Austin economic development, or is this something that you guys are taking on? Like how is that being done? And I guess the same with like the arts, and I don't know if that's something you can talk about, but is that something that's going through like working in tandem with the city, or how is that working?
Sure, let's start with business. I know we have others that have been engaged more in this Jen or Dennis.
Yeah, so with the business assistance plan, it's still being developed. I think you remember that. Francis was here a few weeks ago, maybe about a month or two ago. November, was that long ago? Wow. When she was talking about the program, so we are partnering with, we're reaching out to departments in the city, but as well as nonprofits. And other agencies as we help to set this up to provide the services. As we're still shaping to see what that may look like and the kind of assistance we'll give them, whether it is financial or it is structural or other programs that the federal government may even have or federal agencies may have as well. So we're looking at all kinds of broad range to see what we can bring in to help the businesses with that.
So is there a collaboration with like economic development department of the city or not
We
yet?
reached out to them. It's still early in the conversations of, okay, what do y'all provide and how can that help us with what we're doing? So we've had some early conversations with them, but there's nothing set in stone as yet, as we're still shaping. But they are somebody we are talking to.
And the arts program, hopefully I answer your question. So we are standing up a arts program to go along with Austin Light Rail. And that includes a recent hire of a senior level individual that's going to lead that program. As part of that, they're going to develop kind of goals, objectives, kind of a planning kind of level areas of how they're going to address it. And what I know about that as well is when you incorporate an art program, you're looking for artists that are actually going to provide those art pieces at different locations, stations, the operation facility and so forth. And it's something that we're setting up to be look at local artists, but also national artists as well. So that's all part of that program being developed now.
I would like to emphasize how great it is when we have local artists or anybody that's from Austin. I think that can be very impactful and it seems to go very, the community seems to appreciate that. So, thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Mr. Crossley, and then we'll come to Joseph.
I may have a couple, one, just detail of what you mentioned, 38th Street parking garage. We specifically made a comment on that. And our comment was to not restrict the space to only be parking. And there should be a parking garage, but there should be a 40-story building on top of it. And there should be transit-oriented development at 38th Street. It sounds like the decision was to go to the opposite direction and have less development and less of a public mixed-use space, which doesn't sound appropriate for a light rail station. And one, am I right? And then two, why? you know.
There's one thing I didn't mention as part of this, so, the map doesn't show it, but we also have priority extensions that are included as part of the project, and one of those is to go up to Crestwood. And so 38th Street is really envisioned to be kind of an interim stop. And so to address your comment, that's not to say that it's going to remain surface parking forever. At some point in time, certainly, some type of joint transit-oriented development could be looked at in the future, but as part of phase one, making sure that we have some spots for parking, and as you mentioned, other facilities. I know bike share is something that we're considering as well, and we have other elements that we're gonna have our designer look at, seeing what is, most space appropriate for that location.
Okay, and then just sort of totally different questions, is my understanding of a record of decision is that several things happen. The ATP can now spend money that would be reimbursable should the federal government decide to join in this project. And so we can really start spending real money. And so for a while, I've talked about that we should be prepared to do some early out improvements, such as sidewalk improvements, things people see in their community. And that we could spend real money now, essentially. And so one, am I right with that kind of? And then two is the other side of it, is the federal match. And what can we do to make sure that next spring, the FTA recommends funding this project as a committee?
Yeah, and let's talk about, the reimbursable aspect real quick, because again, one thing that's very technical is that, as I mentioned, the FTA, Federal Transit Administration, it's a very, rigid process you have to go through. And one of those kind of gates you have to get into is what's called project development. And we've been in project development for almost 2 years now, and when you do work in project development, that's actually reimbursable. So we've been in that,
Okay,
for a little while now. When it comes to actual improvements and how we can, do things along design, that's something our design builder is gonna help with. As I mentioned, sequencing is gonna be key to this. So it's not like it's a 10-mile corridor, but we're not gonna build everything along the 10-mile corridor at once. That design builder is gonna help us identify where are areas along the alignment that make the most sense and when. And so to your point, certainly there could be certain, kind of projects that work on sidewalk improvements and bike improvements along the light rail line, could occur at different times, as the sequence is developed. Does that answer your question?
yeah, and maybe just to reiterate, I hope there's serious consideration of what. Basically, parts of the project that are required in the end, but could be done early that communities would see as really beneficial as soon as possible. And things on the ground, so.
Constable Suits.
How many parking spaces do you anticipate at 38th and Waterloo?
At 38th and Water, right now, we have about 50 to 60 assumed, but that's at a really early level of design. As I mentioned, our design builder is gonna kind of take a look at that footprint, is gonna have all the needs that we want in that space to identify what that number could be.
You know, just
Originally-
the land use in that area, just kind of. Thinking how big and how you're gonna fit it in there, because you've got a jigsaw puzzle there.
Certainly is, and if you haven't looked at our designs, again, if you look online, we do have designs drawn at that location. It doesn't show parking spaces or anything, but it gives you a sense of the size of the footprint that we have to work with.
Fair enough, thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead, Ms. Summers.
Am I too far? Do I need to come over? Okay. All right, I've got it. A couple of these are really more comments, but a couple are really questions. So, first with the art, I'm really excited about the art program. Definitely reiterating a lot of things that Miss Berry said. I want to remind all of us that art can flow into urban design and vice versa, right? And this project, I've been so impressed about what ATP has pursued in terms of, I think it's really cutting edge what we've pursued with the urban design grounding for this entire project and all the research that was done and the community engagement that was done. I think sometimes I've seen in planning projects, when you start to do art, they want to, it flows into the design of the project. And so I'm just reminding us all and centering us all that like art should also be it shouldn't obscure like how to get where you're going. So like, I'm just reminding us all that that's really important, is that like these flow into each other, and there's also functionality. You shouldn't, those who know me, you're not gonna be surprised to hear me say this. You shouldn't design something that looks really cool, but doesn't protect people from rain at a transit station. So, you know, I know that y'all know that. I just like to always say that aloud, and I'm really, really excited. I know you've hired a staff member, I believe, or on the process. And so as soon as that person's on board and spooled up, like, I'm so excited to hear from them, and that program. It's gonna be really exciting. So that's just a comment. You don't have to respond. Second, which is also a comment, South Congress, I know there's been a working group. I was unfortunately just missed the calendar invite for the last meeting, but I was sort of attending with the CAC. And so I think it would be good, maybe this is for future agenda, it was in this update, but maybe at some point when appropriate, we, this body might want to hear about that a little bit. So that's just another comment. I will say two other things, and I want to follow the thread. This is actually probably a question. So this is teasing out a little bit of Mr. Crossley's questions. So with 38th Street, I think I can imagine, I haven't read every comment that y'all received, and I'm impressed that y'all read every comment you received. Great work there. But, you know, I think there are some people who had concerns with the idea of building just a parking garage structure, sort of standing alone in an urban intersection at the terminus of our light rail without putting, you know, a building over it or mixed use, you know, around it. There also could be people who are concerned about anything changing, like taking down a Jiffy Lube and building something a little higher, you know? And so I can imagine that there's people coming at that from different directions. And so, I want to also say that one of the things that a lot of us have said is that there are other parking opportunities nearby that area. So if there's opportunities to work with, you know, the hospital or Central Market on garages that already exist, or like ways to get people where they're going, we should look at that. I'm definitely on the side with, I guess, are you still looking at those types of opportunities? Is that something that you're exploring at all?
We heard that comment over and over again through the draft environmental document process. And in fact, as part of our mitigation monitoring plan, that's one of our mitigation commitments, is to look at other opportunities for parking in the 38th Street area in particular.
Yeah.
So yes, actively working with the city, TPW, as we go forward, and once the system opens, to look at other opportunities there.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that we should be planning all of this to be a dense nexus around a station. One of the things that I've seen in city planning before is sometimes we say, we're putting this in and it's our temporary fix. And then some of us remember that and come back 7 years later and say, okay, this was our temporary fix. Let's do the permanent fix now, or build this, scale this up. And people are like, we just built that. You know, so I know that's dangerous working with planning and it's complicated, but I can write down the date of this meeting like, to remind ourselves that like surface parking hopefully is temporary there as soon as we build our, you know, priority extensions. So, any way that we can crystallize that. I don't know. I don't think a permanent surface parking at 38th is in Lamar is the kind of dense nexus that we want to envision there long term. So I'll remember this date.
Do you have a response?
Yeah, do you?
No, it's a good comment. I think we've heard that over and over. And the thing I think I didn't mention, but we want to make sure to know, because we're looking to go north to Crestview, we're certainly not precluding any type of change in the use at the end of line. It's part of phase 1.
Sure, okay. The last thing I want to say is that just sort of a mixed comment. Number one, congratulations. This is, I know I've said it to some of the other staff. I don't think I've had an opportunity to say it to you, but this is really a significant milestone. I think a lot of people really getting medium high, meeting the deadlines. It's all really impressive. And I know that just because of some of the things that have transpired, people are like, well, nothing's going on, nothing's happening. And it's one of those things that nothing's gonna happen until too much has happened. Like, people are already experiencing this with I-35, like, you're not doing anything, and then like, stop doing stuff, you know? So I think that that's where we're headed with this. So really just deep congratulations to you and your team. But here's one thing that I really, as soon as we can let people know something coming, even if it's a ceremonious way, is good. I'm old enough to remember when we broke ground on the Broadmoor station. That's now being constructed, but like, I'm not saying proposing that, we're gonna actually move faster than that. But I think that 2026, we're gonna move really fast, and if we can communicate to people this year, how soon that this is coming. I think in any kind of way that we can, with our public communication, with our groundbreaking or whatever physical ceremony, I think is helpful psychologically for all of us, and also just for this project. I just wanted to say that, it's really a comment, but I don't know, I think that that's important to get done, because it's coming. And it's gonna be a lot, and it's gonna be exciting, so. Miss Brady. go ahead.
That was great, I'm getting my steps in. Just to follow up on that point. What is being done, like you guys did such a great job with the outreach, I think it's great that you guys did 4 when you only had to do 1, I think that's incredible. What's being done now that you're in this space to like close the loop with a lot of these people, besides just having it on the website, like, are you still going out or letting people know that this is where you're at, kind of to her point?
Be honest, do you wanna speak to the community touch points?
So I think we've done a couple of presentations where we were at the CSAC meeting last night before Camp Metro, of course, we went to the access meeting the week before. I think any community opportunity where folks want us to come out, we'll be there. We've gone to the East Riverside corridor event they had, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, where we kind of highlighted some of the work we've done. So there's places we can go, and people want us to show up, we can show and talk to them, kind of give us high level of communication about what we've done. But that's about it for right now, where it's just, here's where we are, this is where we move forward to. It's still not too much to tell, where it's like kind of what we showed you, where we moved a station and we added some other stations, and that's happening, but it's not too much to tell, but we are telling folks who are asking.
I think there is an opportunity there, just like newsletters or something, so people,
Sure.
I think closing the loop
Mhm.
is just really important when we're asking for a lot of feedback, and then they give it, and then they're like, and now what, like, what did y'all do with it?
And
And
I'm being looked at, there is a newsletter in the work to come out, just to list their.
I mean, like, and not even just y'all's newsletter, but like other community newsletters to let them know, because not everyone gets this.
Oh, yeah, part of that, everybody is signed up on Project Connect,
Yeah.
in the ATP newsletter we had, so. I think we can work with our communications team to get something out to organizations, like if you have one for your organization, any other organizations. When they need them, wherever we put them there, we can talk about what we've done, and of course, link them to the FEIS. There's a website, which is still a long document to read,
Right.
but still, link that to them as well, so we can do that.
And one thing I'll make mention of too, especially in the committees we've spoken to recently, we want to make it clear, and hopefully you all make it clear to others, that the NEPA process did not conclude the public outreach process. We're gonna have our designers come in and obviously sharing designs as they go forward, and we'll work with them to figure out the best times and opportunities to present and get feedback as well. But that's all gonna be forthcoming over the next several years.
I'm shocked. Are you telling me not everybody is signed up for the Project Connect newsletter?
Or we're in the final year, that is. Yeah.
Other folks with questions or comments, go ahead, Mr.
Just point out that the bidding process is itself a comment by the vendors on the state of the project. If they get enough sufficient quantity of bids and from companies who are well qualified, that means that the businesses who are in this construction business endorse the project.
It's a really good point. Other folks with questions or comments? I'll just piggyback if folks have other questions, please do jump in. I'll just say, I agree with what Vice Chair Summers is saying. Congratulations again to the team. I think this is a great milestone. We've reached an exciting point. It's also exciting to see honestly how a lot of feedback was incorporated. You're looking at that list of sort of top line changes that align really well with some of the conversations that we were having and hearing and passing it along to y'all. I did have a question for the SoCo stationery. I know that's a conversation that's ongoing and we're trying to figure that out, but one of the things that we had a concern with as a body was just how many left turns there were across the rail. Like essentially, we were just keeping too many traffic intersections and so, but I wonder, I haven't looked at honestly the final, yeah, so I haven't looked at that section to look at, did that change? Do y'all have any response to how we're looking at the traffic intersections on SoCo? And that might be too specific, and if we don't have an answer, that's fine.
Sounds like there are others that have been engaged in those groups.
Hello, Jocelyn Bogues, with community engagement here for ATP. So, because in the draft EIS, we did receive so many conflicting comments, and Susan, you've been a part of the focus group about we should have more room for pedestrians, more room for parking, more room for cafes and bikes. We decided that in that case, we really needed to pull together a South Congress focus group so that we could have people from all different perspectives in the room. And that went surprisingly well. We had one in April, one in June of last year, and then we followed up with a reconvening, January 28th. And so we've presented, with the group's help. They've encouraged us to think of what could, 2 lanes of traffic look like versus 1 lane of traffic. And then the city also came up with the possibility of maybe having what we're calling a convertible lane, which means it would be parking during peak, 2 lanes of traffic during peak hours, parking in the off hours. So there are things like that, which we're not settled on any of those. And the final EIS is still going to show the original design. And so I would say 2026 is a big year for us to continue just refining those design details and technical considerations. And so stay tuned because there's a lot of that's going to be happening arm in arm with the community to refine the station look and the technical features. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkes. I really appreciate that. And I guess, just on behalf of this committee, I'll sort of reiterate that one of our things was just how do we, there's a lot of users in that space. How do we meet all those needs, but also ensure that our light rail is not being sort of unusually delayed or slowed down, going through that sort of, somewhat dense part of our space.
Yes. And I will say, sorry, back to your question about the left turns, that does vary based on the configuration. So that's all still in flux or design. So is the selection of like our light rail vehicles, which could also, the slimmer we've taken a conservative footprint approach. But if light rail is selected with a slimmer body, that could buy us a little bit more room in the bike, pedestrian, cafe areas.
Appreciate that. One other question that I had was, going through the analysis, there was some concern sort of the noise, sound, environmental impacts of the maintenance facility. And can you talk a little bit about that? We know that it's further away from residential neighborhoods. Can you just reiterate that? Because I know that was a major concern that was raised to us.
Sure, and I'll talk a little bit about the analysis itself. So that was one of those locations where we actually did have monitors go out and do some monitoring over 24 hours to get a sense of what does the background noise look like or sound like. And if you haven't been out there, you're this is just off of Riverside and the Airport Commerce. It's a noisy environment to begin with. You have not only the airplane traffic overhead, you also have the freeways that are adjacent. Because it is kind of a commercial area, there are constantly backup noises. So when we got those results, we saw it's actually a pretty noisy area. Now the OMF during construction, yes, there's going to be noise, but we didn't see as part of the analysis anything that would be adverse impact. And then once you get into operation, a reminder that these are really electric vehicles, and anytime maintenance is all done within a shop, so there isn't really any impactful noise beyond what's out there today. So it's always one of the reasons you look for a site like that. It already has background noise, that you're not impeding any type of adjacent residential properties. And so we did some very thorough analysis. And I also mentioned as part of construction, as part of our mitigation plan, we will have monitors all along the alignment, including at the operation facility. And so should we get any contact from anybody that's experiencing kind of out of the normal noise levels from construction. That's something that we look to address through that.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge the committee member Nikki is online and she has a question. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to thank you for your presentation, and I have a follow-up question about your community engagement. I'm just wondering if you could give me more details. Excuse me. I think you, in responding to committee member Barry's question, you gave me some of it, but I'm just curious about who you reached out to geographically and who you engaged with, like some of the, I guess, geographic and demographic information, if you have it. And then I'm just curious also, like moving forward, what are some of your plans with regard to community engagement? I think like almost 3,000 people is very impressive in terms of getting commentary, but it's still a small part of the population that's going to be, impacted by this project and that, this project will bring opportunity to. Thank you.
I think when it comes to the your demographic question, I believe that is in the FBIS. I don't have the exact numbers, excuse me, in front of me, but within the document itself does highlight the demographics of those who chose to give us that information. Of course, we know not everybody wants to fill out that information at times, but from what we could get from folks, we do have some. Yeah, 3,000 is, oh, I'm sorry, I'll slow down. Yeah, I know 3,000 is a good number, but we know how big the city is. And that we will work more. I think for our team, we always strive to do more and do better. To look at what we have done and say we did a great job, but we can always, of course, try to get more people. And so moving forward, we will continue to work with community groups, those who also reach out to us, who would like to see a presentation. We'll go there. I think we continue to try to hit any kind of festival or event where it makes sense for us to be there, whether it's tabling and either talking about what's going on a part of, especially if it's along a certain corridor. Try to highlight what's happening along that corridor for them, but as well as the whole alignment. Or even if it's off corridor, but there, of course, people will be there. We look to attend those as well as far as what we'll work out with the bandwidth for our team, where we can be. And so we'll continue to be out there where needed. We look for events ourselves to attend, but of course, if there's any community member event that somebody highlights for us, if we have enough time, we'll attend those as well.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
think that answered all your questions. If I didn't, let me know, and we can answer those as well.
Mr. Max, if I can also recommend, oh, I'm not gonna remember month, but sometime last spring, we got a presentation on the engagement itself. If we can pull those slides and maybe share them with Ms. McGee, which I believe had information on demographics and other things. I'm trying to remember, but I believe that there was one that was maybe last year. If we haven't, that would be good.
Possibly, I can look and see, but if not, we can also look into the document to see that when we those exact numbers, and it really is within the FBIS, so that might be more accurate than what was done for you, so we can get her that information.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you all so much for this presentation. We'll move on to our next item, for which we have folks from our city of Austin here for the Eton Riverside Planning Update. Ms. Pryor, please. Pull up your slides. Give us a moment here.
Thank you, Jens. Good evening, Chair and committee members. Thank you so much for making some space for us to give you some updates on the East Riverside Corridor Planning Initiative. Ana Villarreal, Principal Planner with Austin Planning. We will be giving you information on the scope of work for this project, the timeline, our community engagement so far, and also some next steps. Apologies to the ETOD working group. We share with you a lot of our timeline and a lot of the basic information, but since we saw you all last November, I think it was, we hosted a number of community events that we're super excited for you all to know about. So with that, we can go to the next slide. So the study area is 3.4 mile corridor, and that extends from I-35 on the eastern edge to State Highway 71 on the easternmost edge. So 35 on the west, State Highway 71 on the east. You see on the screen, we have a black outline indicating the existing ERC regulating plan. And then a shaded area in green, which represent our proposed boundary extension. So that area slightly expands beyond the current regulating plan to make sure that we are extending to half a mile radius around the Project Connect station to make sure that as many people as possible are able to take advantage of the lineup. But these boundaries will continue to be refined with the help of the community during the planning process. Next slide. So this planning initiative, we'll be revisiting two different plans. The East Riverside Corridor Vision Plan, which was adopted in 2010, and the regulating plan adopted in 2013, to make sure that we're adequately addressing current challenges and future growth and development that is equitable along the corridor. And it is a 12-month process that will incorporate 3 different rounds of engagement, and we aim for an adoption date of fall of 2026.
Slow down a little. Just for interpreters.
Yes, thank you. So next slide, thank you. The East Riverside Corridor, as you all know, is one of the most diverse and culturally rich communities in the city, and it has many homes and businesses, and it's a high demand area for public transit. Just to give you an idea of the population that we are working with, it's a relatively young population with a median age of 29 years old. About half of the population is Hispanic and has a median household income of about $75,000 a year. There's over 18,000 housing units along the corridor, with the great majority being multifamily. And most people that live here and rent rather than own their homes. As far as jobs, employment has doubled between 2010 and 2022. And the area is very well served by public transportation, including the new Metro Rapid 800 that goes along Pleasant Valley. So with the development of the Austin Light Rail, the East Riverside Corridor study area is expecting a steady growth for the next several decades. With this planning, we know that we can shape the growth in different ways using policies like zoning and development incentives. So the East Riverside Corridor is anticipated to have and is zoned for an increase in density in the years to come. And what do we know about the area? Based on the city's demographer projections, we know that jobs and population are expected to nearly double throughout Austin by 2060. And then looking at this corridor specifically, we know that the East Riverside Corridor can expect to grow between 30 to 60%. Next slide. So as we plan for the future of East Riverside Corridor, we need to update again the East Riverside Corridor plan and the vision plan, the regulating plan and vision plan. And what we're trying to do here is to reimagine how growth and development can be centered on equity and opportunity. And this means that we will focus on equity, connectivity, housing choice, sustainability, and vibrancy. And essentially, with this plan, we are trying to move away from the basic approach of encouraging any development along the transit corridor to a do no harm approach, which is looking at mitigating displacement and negative impacts of new development. And ultimately, reach equitable outcomes by creating new economic opportunities for residents of all income levels. And what you see on the screen are the 6 ETOD goals that are included in the ETOD policy plan adopted by council in 2020. So with that, I'll give you a recap of our first round of engagement. The purpose for this round of engagement was to make sure that we are understanding the community's priorities, desired community benefits, and development intensity needs. And I will walk you through some of the different events and the different materials that we presented to the community. So last fall, we focused on community outreach by attending many different community events. So we did a lot of tabling at landmarks within the corridor. We were at the Ruiz Branch Library. We were at the Metropolis Rec Center several times. Several events along the corridor since last fall and also early January, and just distributing information about the plan and the open house that we hosted this January. And we also onboarded a group of 8 paid ambassadors to really augment our community outreach. And last month, we kicked off our first round of community engagement, which was the visioning stage of this process, where we, again, tried to gather just general information about what are the places that the community loves, so what should we preserve, how do you feel about density, where should that go, just like the visioning stage of the process. I'm happy to report that we were able to engage over 200 people in person at our events, 100 of those at the open house just 2 weeks ago, the one that Yanis was mentioning earlier. And then we, again, had some focus groups and a virtual meeting that was very well attended as well. And also we've received over 100 survey responses on our Speak of Boston website, which is still open, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but really great engagement so far. So what you see on the screen are just some photographs and images of conversations that we held with the help of the community. So we invited different stakeholders and leaders within the area just to try to understand the needs and priorities specifically from their point of view. We had great representation from property owners and different business owners and stakeholders. And as you can see on the screen, they each provided and highlighted very different things along the corridor. We are working on capturing all of that and producing a full summary report. But it was great to have that initial conversation ahead of the open house. Some of the questions that we asked them included like what kinds of places are most frequented by the community? What challenges do you all face in terms of transportation and noise and safety? What kinds of places should be preserved? What improvements are needed both in public spaces and in terms of like the street infrastructure. So all of those led to the notes that you see on the screen, but are currently being transcribed into an actual document that y'all can see. Next slide, please. So together with Austin Financial Services, which is the leading partner in charge of the Grove Riverside project, we brought multiple partners to an event to try to improve the corridor. And that was focused on different initiatives related to housing, mobility, and public spaces. This was really a great opportunity for the community to come together and learn about the different initiatives and just give us feedback about all of these efforts happening along the corridor. Among some of the partners that were present include Austin Transit Partnership, CAC Metro, Austin Housing, we had Imagine Austin, Movability, and our Grove and Riverside side partners as well. So at this meeting, at the in-person open house on January 31st, we had a little over 100 attendees, and what the community saw at this meeting, they they walked in, they got information on all the different partners that were in attendance, and then they were greeted by art planning staff that walked people over like different informative boards and also different engagement activities to gather feedback. So this section included many different boards on different components of the project, such as existing conditions. So we presented what are the socioeconomic information that I shared with you all. Then the project scope and timeline, showing them the 3 rounds of engagement and what kinds of things we're going to be looking at during each of these engagement rounds. And then we showed them the Project Connect board with information about the status of the Austin Light Rail, and then pointed them to the actual table of ATP. We had information on the concept of equitable transit-oriented development that included information on the policy plan and how that ties to the 6 ETOD goals, and also some of East Riverside Corridor draft objectives that we wanted them to review and help us refine. We also gave them information on zoning and community benefits, information on the East Riverside Corridor Base District. Also, there is an East Riverside Corridor Density Bonus Program that we're trying to recalibrate. So kind of like giving them information for them to understand all these different tools and all the community benefits that they need so that we can have that information as we update the density bonus program. We also covered alternative development scenarios, which this was one of the main components of our open house. We wanted them to see various density scenarios. So we provided illustrations for them to see like what kind of density and the actual location where they would like to see that density. And then some interactive activities where they were asked, what is your connection to the corridor? Where is, can you give us your places that you love and would like to have preserved? We asked them, what are the community benefits that you would like to see near the transit, the light rail stations? And also, how can we improve your mobility and accessibility of the transit station? So the photo that you see on the lower end, those are some additional map activities that we had. And the community got to actually place dots on those places that they like, that they feel like they need improvements. And also they had some pieces with different like density heights, and they were able to place it where they think that density could go. So different types of boards, different types of activities, different questions that were asked. And then we also have some additional partners. Like we mentioned, we have the Grove Riverside team that had some, like they had an area where they provided some listening sessions so the community could go into like a separate room and kind of like talk to them about what kinds of services or amenities they would like to see in that actual site. The Grove Riverside site is a parcel, or actually it's a combination of 3 parcels that the city purchased, and they're also in the process of trying to assess what are what are the needs of the community for that parcel. So the community thought to go into the room and kind of like give them ideas on what they think that place could be. And then we section. We had, again, Austin Housing, providing information on anti-displacement tools, then had CAC Metro information. Their transit plan 2035, Austrian Transit showing update. Imagine Austin updates on where they're at with that update plan and building around people in that really aligns well with the mission of ET. So great combination of partners that are transported that have initiatives along the and we were able to both gather a lot related to all these different projects. So I mentioned that one of the main questions that we asked the community is in relation to the density, the potential density that could go and the types of benefits that could be seen through the different density that we can see in the corridor. So we had like 3 different scenarios that we presented to the community. And this is actually an illustration from our virtual meeting. Our virtual meeting was also very well attended. We had over 50 community members join, and we tried to mirror the information that we presented at the open house. So many of the questions that I mentioned before were presented to the community, and just wanted to run this by you so you all know what kinds of growth scenarios we discussed with the community. So we have the business as usual, which is the lowest estimated growth based on current market conditions. And that is assuming that there's like no changes to zoning and no changes to the current density bonus program. Then we have the growth hubs, which assumes that developers take some advantage of moderate height bonuses, that is about 90 feet or around 8 stories. And then, bless you. We have the transit-oriented urban cores, which this is the highest density that we proposed, and that one includes a more widespread use of high density bonuses that is about 120 feet or around 10 stories along the corridor, but then adjacent to that, a moderate type of height, which could be like about 8 stories in areas that are closest to lower density areas. So kind of like a tier down approach on density. And then we gave them the option of giving us their preferred scenario or something different from what we were proposing. So with that, let me show you the next slide, which is like the response of what we got. So we gathered a lot of different comments, both at the virtual house and the in-person meeting. Again, we're trying to compile all of those comments and kind of like make sense of that into a full summary report that we will be releasing next month. But just to give you an idea of just the general sentiment, there was a significant support for high density, but in close proximity to the transit. I think the community can recognize and they express that they would like to see that kind of density. If you see on the top right hand side of the screen, you'll see that there was 24 people that participated in the Menti questions. Like you had to log into this platform Mentimeter, and then you could respond directly there. Out of the 24 community members that provided responses, 20 responded in favor of scenario 3, which represented the highest density option. And again, important to say is that the support was really seen all across the different meetings that we had. This was seen in the comments that the community perceived this high density as an avenue for increasing housing supply, providing more affordability, supporting transit ridership. But also they were very clear that this kind of density needs to be paired with tools that address anti-displacement measures, and also providing support for both existing residents and existing business owners. So it wasn't like, oh yeah, we want density. It was like, we can understand that by providing more density, there's gonna be more amenities and more things that the community can enjoy, but they're also concerned with displacement and both tenants like residents, but also business owners. So they would like to see a lot of support on that end. Next slide, please. So that was the general sentiment in terms of density, but we also received a lot of different comments in our community conversations. But again, I was very surprised that there was very clear consensus on just the challenges and the opportunities that the community expressed. Like overall, we heard the same themes and topics come up through the different conversations. They included, again, concerns of displacement, particularly rising property values, and specifically rising property values following the Austin Light Rail come through. Also a desire for greater community stability, and also we heard that they would like to have more opportunities for home ownership. We heard a lot of comments related to social equity issues, specifically highlighting that there's insufficient resources and maintenance compared to other sites or other parts of the city. So they feel like there's a lot more resources that are given to other areas versus the East Riverside. We also got a lot of comments about safety concerns, and that is both in terms of the community expressing that they would like to see crime reduced, but also safety in terms of moving around the corridor and how there needs to be just an enhancement of pedestrian and cycling infrastructure so they can actually move around and access the transit in a safe way. Also, there are big gaps in services, parks, and community gathering spaces. And they expressed a strong desire for cultural preservation, and that was also divided into different categories, such as including making sure that the community has different areas that have dedicated spaces where they could express their culture and gather and come together, but also some kind of like historical record keeping of the history of the area. And lastly, you know, an emphasis on balancing growth with preservation and a very strong support for high density, but again, making sure that one, it includes a lot of tools for supporting current residents and business owners, and also making sure that the density is sensitive to its context so that it gradually decreases as it starts to get into the single family homes. So many comments, again, putting together right now a full summary report that we'll release, but I think we've been given very clear guidance from the community, and what we're doing right now is trying to go through all of those comments, and the next step will include a preferred growth scenario based on the feedback that we received. So for this community exercise, we're still taking comments.
Mrs. Underline, we'll point out you have you should wrap up the presentation so we can get to questions.
Yes, this is one of the last few slides. So we have a survey. Yes, can you put it this? Thank you. We have a survey that's still open. So if you all have any comments, or if you know anyone that lives or works or has a stake here in the corridor. We still have our survey open. We actually extended our survey from closing on February 13th to closing on the 16th, which is Monday. You will, that QR code will take you to our page, then click on survey. It's a very short survey. It should take you 10 to 15 minutes to complete. And that all would be included in the comments that we take into account as we. Text. So we had several briefings this week. We briefed our ETOD TAC team. We also provided a briefing to the Housing and Planning Committee. We are waiting on the community to accept some more briefings. We have extended an invitation that if they want to know about this, so please have us talk to their residents. We haven't scheduled any of those just yet, but we're trying to really talk to the community and make sure that the neighbors in this area know that this is happening and how to participate. Again, that document, that full summary report will be released in the coming weeks. And then as we prepare for the second round of community engagement this spring, these are the things that we're going to be looking at. It includes different case studies for the proposed density. We're going to be doing like a closer look into property specific sites to see like how we can address this density, and again being very sensitive and what types of density we proposed along the corridor. We're going to be looking at financial analysis and community benefits analysis, and then we'll produce a preferred scenario, which will be based on all the feedback we've received so far. So that concludes the update. We'd love to hear from you if you have any questions, and also some kind of ideas on how we can potentially involve more residents on this corridor in the next phase.
All right, since the chair had to step off the dais, I am chairing the meeting, so vice chair, Summers here. So I'll look around for questions. Lots of questions will go to Mr. Crossley.
One, the QR code doesn't work anymore, but I tried the URL and it works, so
Okay,
it's probably
perfect.
just the QR code, not the page.
We'll definitely look into, this is our last briefing, but thank
Yeah.
you for doing that.
Well, so I think that's very interesting about the response and
Mhm.
about density, and I just was thinking about the numbers, did some quick math, 18,000 housing units. There's like 2.5 people per unit, so that's like 45,000 people live there now. And then, but then the city demographer only gave you a range of 10 to 25,000 more people, which is problematic to me. So we're proposing this very great place to live will not grow as fast as the region. And so I hope that we can entertain the idea of real dense urban development here and 45,000 more people living there. And I wonder how that might change some things. And so, and given this, especially that corridor, and like basically where we're gonna build light rail stations, there are massive parking lots.
Right.
That there's extraordinary potential to do that well. And so with the state law changes, the city cannot limit development to a great extent along that corridor anymore. It's not allowed to, but those max out at a certain point. And so I really hope we can explore the bonus programs being unlimited here and say, if you build things that meet our community benefits and that provide affordable units, there are no height limits, there are no FAR. We are not doing complicated market analysis to prove that it's worthy to build XYZ building. Completely remove the limits on the amount of people allowed to live within walking distance of the railroad station. And so I just wonder if that can seriously be considered here. And in some way allowing, like as was said in the community, that we want people to be allowed to live within walking distance of transit. How can we get the city out of the way of that? And that to me is what equitable transit development means. The people who live there now should be part of how that growth happens, but not deciding other people aren't allowed to live here. So. Maybe that was a whole lot, but I wonder if such things can be entertained in this next
Yeah,
phase.
take a look at the legality of saying it's unlimited. But I think there are great potential for increasing the density, in this area significantly. And it was very surprising to us too, to see, such strong, appetite for high density, in the area. And we were just talking internally of like, looking at the demographics of who's responded to a survey, whether that was our Speak of Boston survey or our event survey. Many of those are property homeowners, like they're homeowners, and usually we tend to see homeowners being kind of like against density, and they're actually supportive, given that we actually give the community additional benefits and amenities and everything that they feel they need. So I think it's a great opportunity to take advantage of, the disposition to add more people and see opportunities to collaborate with our Austin Housing Department and develop economic development as well. And we're also having conversations with ATP and that like what kinds of funding is available to make sure that the assistance program gets used well along the corridor and making all those kinds of connections and conversations.
Well, just final thought, just everything I was saying is within the bonus world, where we get the community benefits and where ask private investors to pay for things that we want. And so within that world, let's remove the limits, how much good we can get out.
Go ahead, Ms. Berry, and then.
Two questions. First of all, of course, thank you so much for the presentation, really great information. Do you guys capture how long people have been living in that area? Is that something that you guys capture?
We are capturing whether they live there. I don't think we're asking specifically for how long. However, looking at the responses, we've received a lot of responses where we've actually been told, oh, I've lived there for 20 years, 5 years. And many of the focus groups attendees have been community members for 20, 30 years. So longtime residents that really have a lot of experience and have a lot of connections from people that actually understand like how the corridor has evolved and has a lot of ideas on how it should continue to change.
I think that would be an interesting data point, because Riverside, I feel like we've already seen changes happen in Riverside, so I'd be curious to see how many people that have been there, like legacy homeowners who have been there for a while and how they feel compared to some of the newer families. That'd be really interesting to see. And my second question was, given the political state of things, what is being done to ensure that people that want to come in person feel comfortable and safe?
Yeah,
At all?
yeah, it's been definitely a challenging time to engage people, and we are currently, exploring additional opportunities to get feedback from the community and share this with the community that don't necessarily involve them coming to us. So I think one great avenue that we explored is the virtual meeting, which had great attendance. But as we start to think about phase 2, I think we're also having conversations on, should we tap more into our ambassadors? Because we have 8 paid ambassadors that are very well connected along the corridor. And so we're thinking of maybe relying a little bit more on them to share information, to gather feedback, to have us go to them instead of calling them to come to this one place. So definitely the community engagement in the next round would probably include like a different strategy on that end, but we're exploring that.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Handel, please go ahead, Ms.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I actually went to the in-person meetings and my kids really appreciated the face painting, the donuts. I always I drag my kids to a lot of stuff, so that was one where they did. I feel like they enjoyed the event, so I was like, okay, good. But, oh, I also wanted to mention, I did appreciate one thing about the presentation, I think I saw that there was, it felt like there was. It tied the high density to the community benefits, and I feel like that's something that's not often said, is like the density is what brings the benefits, and there's usually like this. And the fact that people responded positively maybe means that people are starting to recognize that more, that it's hard to get the benefits that people want if you go with like a low density scenario. It's business as usual, like not much, you're not gonna be that. But the comment about home ownership, it did remind me of something. I saw recently, and I know this is on the city side, that they're working on some new missing middle zoning categories, the MR and MX things, and I remember the phase one ETOD mostly had to do with the high density stuff that's going, pretty much right next to the stations, it feels like, and that's great. I was curious because there's so much talk about like, well, how are we gonna, the tapering of it, or like what goes next to it, and the home ownership stuff. I was thinking, is there anything in this ETOD, this phase or the East Riverside that's thinking about ways to incorporate maybe some sort of missing middle into the walk shed or the bike shed area around there, so that people could have opportunity, because I imagine, if we're zoning for things that are high height, it's probably gonna be multifamily, it's probably gonna be rental, like, that's just how it is. So if we wanted something in there that's kind of transit, a little transit oriented, but still potentially home ownership, then, what I was seeing in those initial things from, like the MX or MR categories that they're cooking up, like, there might be something, a fit for something in a kind of an ETOD plan, and I think I see sometimes in other cities or states that are doing their version of TOD, that there's usually maybe some sort of missing middle component, so I was just curious if that's.
Yeah, I think we've definitely heard that from the community, because we have like the two polarized ideas of like no density or a lot of density, and I think like as part of the conversations with the community members, I feel like we don't want density. It's like, well, could there be a possibility where there's slightly more density, but not in what they call the canyons? Because we heard that over and over, like, we don't want those canyons, but could it be something different? Could it be the missing middle? And that's certainly a tool that is not fully fleshed out, because a different team within the planning, Austin Planning, is just released a study that will be considered by council. Hopefully it moves forward, and that's a tool that we can incorporate here. But I think this corridor can definitely take some of the missing middle, because that about 80% of the community here rents, and I think that, as expressed by the community, has brought up a lot of instability. So they're kind of like really wanting home ownership opportunities. And I think that will be a good middle ground between adding density, adding some stability to the neighborhood. We just need to make sure that, like those details of how those will work get flushed out by council. But that's also in the works, so it's very timely as well.
Summer's just gone.
You actually basically asked my question, but I wanted to say two things. So one, I think I immediately noticed the home ownership piece, and I had a conversation years and years ago at this point with Seattle planners that stuck with me, where they referred to it as the X, where it's like you upzone your streets, like where your station is, you're like just on the streets, you like allow dense multifamily, and then that's it. And then the X doesn't really, in the end, get you the outcomes that really make your community livable, walkable. It's like really those, and that if you want to build home ownership opportunities, and I would argue you're not going to get there without missing middle. So I think one of the things that was interesting in some of the comments is people will say, like that I see lately, is that people say, well, we've got to taper it off. And sometimes they're actually saying it because people will oppose it otherwise. I support it being super dense, but I'm worried about the opposition. And so if we're all saying that, then maybe we all just support all the things. We're just worried there's somebody out there who doesn't support all the things, so I think. So I think it's important to frame that and like look at the tenor of the comments around it. I do think everybody agrees, like, we're not gonna build 7 stories back and back and back to the neighborhood, but like, I think to build the kind of communities I think people want, the missing middle as a piece that needs to be looked at, and I think Austin has really pursued a lot, just doing, I don't wanna call them canyons, well, maybe it's fine, canyons would be really nice, natural features. We've pursued, we can do more, but we pursue that to some extent, but I think that really the juice is not just doing the X. We gotta start spreading out a little bit, so.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Nurse. Ms. McGee, please go ahead.
Yeah, 3 cheers for the missing middle. So I just had a quick follow-up question. So just like biking and riding like the 7 and the 800 through the neighborhood, it's already like a pretty dense neighborhood, which is awesome, and I think like a good foundation to build on. And I'm just wondering within like your community engagement for the next round, I definitely hear the desire for stability and homeownership, but in a neighborhood that does have so many renters who have like high transit demand, what are some of the things that y'all are thinking about in terms of like including renters in that larger discussion of what the community will look like going forward?
Yeah, I think we are definitely in great need to talk to those community members. I think the feedback that we got from homeowners and renters was around the focus groups, but we definitely are aware that we need to include more renters, more low income residents in the conversation. If you all have any ideas on how we can do that, the youth as well, because the age bracket that we were able to successfully engage was 25 from 64, but not like the youth or like younger adults. So we're thinking like, should we do Austin City Youth Council in terms of the low income residents? Should we talk to the different communities, multifamily communities, the consulate too, because I think like there's a lot of fear of talking to the community in certain spaces. So can we partner with the consulate, the Mexican consulate? We're really open to ideas on how we can engage more of those demographics that have been not fully represented in this first phase. We've had great attendance, but we also want to make sure that the representation of those groups that need to be included is there. So definitely, if you all have any ideas of how we can do that, we'd love to have them. We are planning on extending our reach, and we are just in conversations on how to do that.
Ms. McGee, did you have any follow-up?
Yeah, that's great. I'm just wondering, are you all like allowed to present to school contexts at all? Or is that just like out of the question?
I think we are. I have not heard otherwise. We have been working closely with Beatty Elementary. There's only 2 elementaries, Beatty and Allison, within like closing distance of the study area. But we are thinking in terms of like engaging the youth or young adults, like partnering with ACC. We've had an ACC representative at one of our focus groups. So tapping into that connection to table at ACC and kind of like get that perspective. But yeah, certainly, we've been in contact with those elementary schools. They've helped us distribute information about the open house. And yeah, so they're really a good group to work with. They're amazing, and I mean, I think that's a great way to make sure that we're getting the families that live around the area.
Yeah, and just as a quick follow-up, did the ambassadors do canvassing at all?
They do, we are not restricting their outreach to any particular way, so we're not telling them how to reach out to their community members. But we are asking them to have a goal between 30 to 60 new community members. So we're hoping that they are, sharing information through different avenues. I know some of them have been very active on their social media. Some of them work for nonprofits within the area. We have a community member that's the president of the EROC. So I think we're very mindful as we onboarded these ambassadors to make sure that they already were very well connected. Just to make sure that that outreach is really heightened. So I think any way in which they can help us spread the word has been encouraged.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Any other questions that folks might have? I'll make this quick, and I'm sorry to step out, so my apologies if you already covered this. What, for the folks that you're engaging, how many renters have you engaged with versus owners?
Do we have a statistics of renters versus owners? No. I don't think we have asked that, but we can definitely consider, like, because we are planning to have a survey for every round of engagement, so maybe that's a question that we can ask in the next round, and we'll circle back with y'all once we have the content that we'll present in the second round, so y'all can take a look at it and give us feedback.
Great. And for the ambassadors, how many are renters?
That's a great question. I know that we have a combination. We have some that are property owners, but I think most of them are renters. Many of them have, you know, I won't say any names specifically, but we onboarded several ambassadors that have been previously homeless, that they have a lot of lived experience. Many of them move around in public transportation, so
And I'm sorry, I'll just make this good because I do need to go to the next item. If, I guess I'll recommend if you can share that information with us out of the 8 people, how many folks are renters, like that would be helpful.
yes.
And I was also going to recommend reaching out to BOSTA and then Workers Defense. So through the Austin Housing Community Investment Solutions grants, there's folks working on these corridors, so I would reach out to them because they're working with renters as well.
Perfect, sounds good.
Okay, thank you
so
very
much.
much. Appreciate it. Folks, as we go to our action item, I'll go ahead and share my screen and just walk you all through sort of what it looks like. So give me 5 minutes and then we can move to discussion. So this is really the main thing to look at in terms of what the funding looks like. I'll go to the memo that had been shared previously with you as well. But just looking at it, so you can sort of see it's broken up into, we're making a 3-year recommendations, that's 20 million per year, 60 million for a 3-year total. And we broke it out, the administration working group worked on this recommendation with feedback from our Austin housing folks, but also Riftelis had done a community engagement that they had engaged us in, but also community members, and that's part of where we're getting our information from. So just looking at it, the first item is we decided to combine affordable housing development, multifamily preservation, and land acquisition. And you can see it sort of tapers off with 2026 having the largest amount for those functions, and then sort of tapers out. On the flip side, the second item is programs and other strategies. And so we see that those were programmatic strategies and immediate needs, it sort of goes the other direction, where we have 0.5 million in the first year, then it goes to 2.5 and 6, with 9 million total over the 3 years. And then lastly, this is based on request from Austin Housing, for staffing and administration, we have a recommendation of 1.5 million each year. This includes staffing, administration, but also community engagement, marketing, and we had some recommendations related to that I'll pull up here in a second as well. In terms of the memo that had been shared, I'll pull it up and we can go through it. I'm happy to talk more about it and let other committee members speak as well. So, you know, the top of it, of course, really is just the premise of how we got to here with Riftelis and Austin Housing. Our recommendation for those 3-year totals, I showed it to you in a table because I think it's more legible that way, but this is how we have it in the memo for the 3 years and then year 1, year 2, and year 3. In addition, our anti-displacement rehab investment guidelines associated with that as well, slowing down. First is the Austin light rail focus, so particularly for the affordable housing development, multifamily preservation, and land acquisition, we're asking that the focus really remain on that Austin light rail phase 1 plan that we have, including the extensions. As mentioned, we tried to provide some funding flexibility, so rather than breaking it up into buckets, it's all one so that Austin Housing can figure out in terms of investment, but we would still ask that staff have investment within all of those, so not just affordable housing development or preservation, it would be covering both of those. In addition, we've really focused on deeply affordable housing, really getting to that 30% MFI and lower. It's a need that continues to be highlighted. It came out in our displacement engagement as well, so we're taking it from there. There's also a recommendation for the ETOD fund. The idea would be of creating sort of a revolving loan fund that works with private developers to have more of those affordable opportunities, but also other kinds of community opportunities such as grocery stores, senior and childcare and other things. So this is, I wish Mr. Crossley was here. I know he can speak so much more to it, but he had done some study of looking at national best practices and took it from there. And that's what this essentially is coming from. For the programs and other strategies, we're maintaining geographic scope. So this is within 1 mile of the project and at high capacity. That includes light rail, the metro rail, and bus rapid. As I mentioned, we're looking at phased programming. So because we know that there's in the programmatic space, there's several funding sources that already exist. There's 5 million that is being carried forward in a potential grant program. For those who had gone into the community initiated solutions grant earlier, a lot of them have extensions, and so those programs are going to continue. And then lastly, I think one of the things that we did hear from staff was that the working group really was recommending looking at solicitations and targeted programs rather than grant application program. And within that, we highlighted certain things for staff to focus on. One is estate and probate planning, local tenant-based rental assistance or a voucher program. So as opposed to rental assistance, having more of a voucher program. Looking beyond the displacement prevention navigator program to see how we can have folks who can really do one-on-one counseling, enrollment support for programs and things like that. This is something that we continue to do and might make more sense now, which is we know that within federal guidelines for relocation, there's a gap for folks who might not be documented. And so we're trying to see that if there's gap within that gap can be filled with some of this programmatic funding as well. And then lastly, I think while we all understand sort of the need for looking at business support, we know there's work happening at ATP, the city's economic development department is looking at it. And then in addition, based on the feedback we've received, that just did not get to the highest priority. So we're open for that to see how that can be worked on across the different bodies. And then just for that staffing administration community engagement, one is really just seeing how do we have more program analysis for our existing CIS programs and any other programs and see how we can align them. And lastly, to really have just some enhanced communication. So how do we really do some affirmative marketing to folks to really help them understand all of the different programs that exist? I'll stop there and see if my working group members want to add anything and questions as well. Go ahead, Mr. Crossley.
Can I just make sure everybody understands that this is part of the $300 million. Basically the $20 million a year, we're somewhat stuck to that. And we are making a recommendation to council. Council may do whatever they want with this. But just sort of understand that this committee has done this several times, so where they're, okay, for the next several years, this is the direction we're hoping to take with these funds. And there are parameters on the funds based on the election in 2020 over what anti-displacement means and how we want to do this. So.
Thank you, Mr. Crossley. That's really helpful.
You may have said this, and I'm tired, but I think it's really important to remember that we've engaged a lot around this housing. So there was the Nothing About Us Without Us anti-displacement equity pool. There also was a consultant hired in this process that did do some research. And rather than, we decided to do targeted research. So the working group requested with Austin Housing requested a specific targeted community outreach. So we asked them to have focus groups with or speak to interviews with BIPOC leaders
And we suggested the leaders that they would speak to. We also suggested, that they speak to the folks administering the CIS programs and some of the recipients if they could. And we also checked, we knew that, youth is a problem. And so actually one of the most exciting things about this engagement is they actually went to Travis High School and talked to students into the classroom about this project and the funds. And the students gave some very interesting feedback. So I think that that's a pretty more cutting edge type of engagement in the city. So I think that that was really positive. And I think they also did some youth intercept interviews.
They did.
So they were trying to hang out where youth were hanging out and then asked them to talk about trains and housing. So anyway, so we did get that feedback. We considered what they said and created some of these recommendations as well. And again, like Jay said, we have basically 60 million per year, so 20 million per year. And then it's figuring out what mix of things are we funding. And this is now the third time we're doing a 3-year tranche of this funding and this is all that 300 million affordable housing. So if that helps.
And we'll open it up to questions or comments.
I think I know what multifamily preservation means. Isn't that one of the items mentioned?
Ms. Brooks, could you come closer to the microphone?
I think I know what preservation of existing multifamily housing means. I think it's one of the items that's actually mentioned in the uprooted report. Okay, but I'm afraid that the larger public may not know what it refers to. The first time it's used, I would add some kind of phrase like existing affordable housing or existing multi.
That's helpful.
That's very helpful.
And we talked a lot about the affordable housing development, multifamily preservation and land acquisition. And initially, and in the previous tranches, we had actually designated amounts for each of those. And as we really dug in, as Yvette described, we just thought staff has the knowledge to understand what's best and how to spend the money. And so we just sort of all put that in a bucket together, but I think all of those strategies should be pursued.
I think that's a really good point, so I just made a note of it to say, and we can do this throughout the document, so we say preservation of existing multifamily housing, so it's a little more descriptive. And then when we take action on this, we'll make sure that we're voting for that edit to be used throughout the document, because that phrase is repeated multiple times.
And I think it's important to remember that the preservation of existing multifamily housing can communicate with affordable housing development. So like, we have already started to see, they've bought an existing affordable housing apartment complex. And that had some vacant land or parking lot, and then they can add additional units on that land. And I think we'll continue to see that as a strategy over the long term, that once those acquisitions are held by the city, they can be flexible with how they see their future, so.
Other questions or comments? And I'm so sorry, folks online, we can see you. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and speak as well. Yeah, please.
Just a thing to share, one, this subcommittee is rad and so much information, like we have learned so many things about, and like the CIS program is so, like this comprehensive approach to anti-displacement strategies as part of a development of light rail line is innovative and it's been studied nationally and it's awesome. And there's a lot there, and there's a lot on like what actually works to help people or not. And so one, I think there's room for one more person to join the committee, or we can change. And that the way this is proposed, we basically assume there will be a lot of work on the CIS programming and optimizing that over the next couple of years. And so that committee, I think, will do a bunch of neat work, really focused on how do we spend anti-displacement money to help the most people. And so just encourage other people sign up. I guess we know at least one more, or we can trade out people.
Thank you, Mr. Crossley. Other folks with questions or comments? And my apologies for trying to rush through this. I just want to make sure that we're, responsive to everyone's time. So just to explain, folks, our hope would be, this would be the recommendation from the working group to see if the body is willing to vote on this. If we vote to it, this recommendation goes to Austin City Council. From what had been circulated, the only thing that I made a mistake on was the logos. The logo is updated. My apologies on that. Beyond that, really, this one edit that Mr. Brooks had recommended, will make sure that that's included and that language is replicated. I want to say in at least 4 other places, if not more. Any other, please go ahead.
Yeah, is there any mention or consideration of just doing public housing rather than public-private partnerships, and you get to build 16-story rather than 10 if you did set aside a section?
So this would be, let me think this through. So we do not necessarily say how the funding would, just for folks online, the question was there any conversation about public housing rather than just public-private partnerships?
That's right.
So, we're essentially thinking of this. Currently, the city has what is called there's 2 programs, the rental housing development assistance program and the ownership housing development assistance. So essentially what that looks like is that a developer, usually nonprofits, but can be private sector as well, apply for a project and they get funding for those units. The funding from this can only go to those units that are 50% median family income or below. So if there's a mixed income project, you would not be eligible to utilize these funds for anything above 50% median family income. But to that point, we didn't necessarily state anything around public housing, and we definitely could. I do not see any concern with saying that staff should maybe explore more public options for housing as well, not just part games. Any other questions or comments? I'm gonna, okay, y'all might have to give me a moment to do this, or I can just put that in. We'll just make an edit to that if folks trust us to do that later. Any other questions or comments? Or edits, suggested edits as well? If not, if folks are fine with it, let me make a motion and see if folks are agreeable to it. So we would be making a motion to approve this memo with that change in language suggested by Mr. Brooks. And then for the deeply affordable housing, we would call attention to not just exploring public-private partnerships, but really looking for options to expand more public housing as well. That would be my motion. Do I have a second to that?
I'll second.
Oh, thank you.
Well, yeah.
I'll wait for a second. I saw you first. You had to beat my lines, slide, so I appreciate that. Any questions on the motion itself? And if not, all those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Gorse. That passes unanimously. I'll essentially be sharing this. I'll make those language edits, and then the other thing I'll do is I'll put our vote in here so that that's noted at the bottom as well. Okay, I'll stop sharing so we can look at folks. I know we have our essentially staff updates and we have working group updates. What I would ask is, does anybody have any concern if we skip our working group and committee updates? Any concern from the committee members and staff? Any concern? Are there any really time sensitive items that we need to share at this time with the committee?
I have a few, but I can send them to you honestly, distribute by committee.
Are you sure? Okay. And. Okay, I think we're. So what I'm hearing from our staff is both City and Cap Metro, there's a few updates. They will send them out via email. Thank you all for being flexible on that. Any concern from folks if we do that? Okay, this takes us to future meetings and agenda items. I heard one on the South Congress, when I think it's a little more fleshed out, we'll ask our AP staff to come and give us a
I
presentation.
don't need to rush that, but I think it's important that eventually we hear about it. I think we said this the last time, but the public art, whenever that person is ready to speak to, whenever that person exists, maybe they don't exist yet. Whenever they exist as an employee and they're ready to speak with us, we would love to speak with them.
That sounds great. Yes, Ms. Berg.
I heard something earlier in a meeting about the digital wayfinding with Capital Metro, and I was curious about some updates in terms of like the digital wayfinding that they have and how it can work with everything done.
So in case this could not be heard online, we have a request to have Cap Metro come and present on its digital wayfinding work, so we'll put that in our queue as well. Ms. Summers, did you have anything?
I know we were set some documentation, but we have been talking about like the bus shelters and like that team coming to speak with us about how they make those decisions. So I'm just reminding ourselves that that is in our docket kind of as well.
That is, and actually, if I remember correctly, it's on our next agenda. So that should be coming soon. These two items were just time sensitive, so we have to do them. Any other items? One quick update from me, we had gotten some feedback on the way our minutes were being recorded. I went back and worked with staff. We're gonna make sure that we're adding the names of the people who are coming for public comment, so that's recorded, it'll be standardized. So that we can maintain that moving forward, and then essentially if there's one of the things that I wish to explore with staff is if we need to go back and revise some of we might bring that back as an action item, but just being responsive to the requests that we had received from the community. Okay, yes,
Just to clarify, the comment you just made right now about working with staff, is that the request earlier today or the?
that was, if you remember, Mrs. Zenobia Joseph
Okay,
had talked about,
Okay,
our minutes were not. We were
Yeah.
recording, and that's partially because our staff has changed, so we figured out with the way it's done for the board, and we're gonna be consistent with that. But that might mean we have to go back and remind some of our previous.
okay. Are we are we going to call attention to the comments from earlier today? Is that something also in conversations with staff? Or like, what can we do with that?
100%. So
Okay.
I intend to bring that up with our HP team that does the application process to see how we can be more responsive. This was the second time we kind of did it, and because the process keeps on changing. Knock on wood, I hope this is the process we think is the best one, and we can stick to it and fine tune it.
Or at least just like the communication on knowing
Yes.
who to reach out to and like that piece, and that's like. That's apart from the application process. I think that's just something that's helpful for people to know how to get in contact with us or with the center.
Agreed.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Okay, well, not hearing otherwise, I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn this meeting of the CAC at 7 p.m. Thank you all very much. Thank you.